This is disc number 10, July 30th, 2015. And boy, am I nervous right now. But let me say this, that in contemplating over all that's happened and what is yet to happen, and having lived all of that, what is yet to happen, I boil down to one word, and that word is power. And power is that what causes motion. It's the ability to act. It's the force or strength within us to work. Now, Emerson made this statement about power. He says, "Do the work, and ye shall have the power." So the question becomes, what comes first? Now you have the matrix of do the work, and the next matrix is that ye shall have the power. A lot of people wait around until they have the feeling and whatever it takes to move forward. But that's the opposite of what Emerson taught. He maintained that you do the power, that is, you do the work, and in so doing the work, then you obtain the power. And I know from experience, he's absolutely right. Now, here I am. We've gone through 10 discs, and I knew that I needed a mentor. And a mentor is an instructor. That's what a mentor means, an instructor that you trust and have faith in, and you look up to, and they care about you, and they're competent and capable of giving you the kind of information or the help, assistance, inspiration, whatever, that you need to move forward. Now, in that context, I want to tell you a story. And the story is about Ernest L. Wilkinson, who was the president of BYU for 20 years. And he started in 1951. That was my senior year in high school. And he completed in 1951 to 1971. Okay, that's the time frame. He had a problem. And he needed a solution to that problem. And that would take a person to come forth and help him. So Ernest Wilkinson, operating out of Provo, Utah, living in a house on the campus of BYU, wherein he took a salary of $1 per year during those 20 years. So he got a $20 bill. He drove to Salt Lake City and met with the president of Zions Bank in the main office and his right-hand man, who was a man by the name of T. Bowering Woodbury. He outlined his problem to them and said, I got to have someone who can get this done. It's going to take 1 week. Who do you recommend? And they both spoke up, as I've heard the story told to me by them, and said there's only one guy that we would trust. It's Doug Snarr. He said, all right, I'll go with that. They phoned me. I remember getting the phone call. Can you come, drop whatever you're doing, and come right now to the bank? I said, well, now what have I done wrong? And they said, don't worry about that. This could be positive or negative. He says it's going to be positive. So then I felt, what a relief. So I went to the bank. Well, I was introduced to Ernest Wilkinson. And he told me it's going to take a week. You'll get on an airplane on a Sunday afternoon following your church meetings. You'll fly to, and I can't disclose here where to. I don't think it's proper. It was held in confidence to one of the major cities in the United States. You'll be there Monday through Friday. You get back on the airplane on Saturday morning, then you come home. Will you do it? Now, this was not going to be an easy task. And this happened just before the bank called me and just before all the bad information had hit the newspapers that billboards were to come down. So I was kind of feeling good and in a positive mood. In fact, I was at the pinnacle of my, let's say, best feelings, of the vicissitudes of my life, as at the pinnacle. So they said, here's the tickets, and here are the reservations for the hotel. And I did it. It wasn't easy. But I had to represent, not me, but Mr. Wilkinson. So I had to sell these people on doing something for him. And that was the trick of the trade. But when Saturday came, got on the airplane, I flew back. I went and met with Ernest Wilkinson, and I said to him this: I have successfully carried the message to Garcia, which is the title of a book by Elbert Hubbard. Now, he knew what that meant exactly, that I did the job. So I felt pretty good about that. Now, the question becomes that I did the work and the power came to me in this instance. I needed a mentor, and now it started to create a mentor in Wilkinson. So it just so happened that he'd come to Salt Lake City, give me a call, you have lunch with me at the Elder Club. And yes, and we would talk. And this happened several times. And I felt very, very good about this. I mean, it was kind of, let's say, made my, it built my ego, let's say this, and my own self-image within myself. Later on, I'm going to kind of stick with Wilkinson for a little bit. I noticed how he dressed. And he was in dire need of help. Here he had the students, and then he had himself looking like he was 150 years old in the clothing that he was wearing. Now, it fit him, that's one thing, but it didn't have the image that I felt he should have. So what I did was, I went and bought 5 ties. These ties were bright. And I called him. I said, I want to show you something that I think you're going to really like. Come on down, come on down. So I drove down, walked into his office, and I said, President, these ties you're wearing, you got to admit, they're horrible. And he just leaned back in his chair. He's not used to that. And so then I laid out the first tie. Oh boy, that is really something. And the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. 5 ties. He said, how much do I owe you? I says, nothing. This is from me to you. I'm thrilled to be able to give you these ties. You need these ties in the worst way. So this happened, I think, twice on the ties. And then I said to him, now, President Wilkinson, I think that all your life you've had a problem of being able to buy a suit. Because in the first place, you're short, you're very thin, it's hard to be able to find a suit that would fit you wherever you went. And he said, oh, it's been the nemesis of my life, being able to buy a suit. If I get one that works, I just wear it till it wears right out. I said, well, I've got the guy that what we'll do is that he will come because he has at his command a tailor. And that tailor will take and make that suit out of the material that you choose. Now, I would recommend right now to kind of bring you into vogue, you go into a pinpoint. And so he said, all right. I said, and I got to warn you, this guy swears, this guy smells tobacco, this guy is the opposite of probably anybody you met is you have no idea who I've met. I have met so many different kinds of people. Now, Wilkinson maintained a law firm in Washington, D.C., called Wilkinson, Brigham and Barker. And this was just down about 3 houses from the White House, and or I should say 3 doors down. But and he'd been there all those years. Wilkinson had become probably the #1 man in the United States, as an attorney, that is, who had various Indian tribes that came to him for advice, pursuant to legislation and so on and so on. And out of that, he was able to, over a 17-year period, to get a bill through Congress, and which benefited the Indians immensely. And out of that, this is where he got his wealth, was from that, because he took a percentage of the action. And it was a 17-year feat. And so he understood all of the ins and outs and how the problems of Washington, D.C., how they mislead, they lie to you, on and on we go, the threats and everything that is connected to Washington, D.C. And I believe that from that we were eventually able to kind of build a relationship, because when I got involved, why, he started to empathize with me. Now, back to the suit. So I said, now, when do you want to meet this guy? He'll come to your office. He's going to measure you up, and you can order a suit right through him. Trust me, it's going to be fantastic for you. He said, I want to see him immediately. He gave me the phone number. I want to immediately have him call my secretary, and I'll tell her that he has first rights to me. How long is it going to take? I said, well, I know that you're a man of time, and I would say about as long as you want it to take, but to get the job done, I'd give him an hour. Okay, he's got an hour. And if he needs more, I'll give it to him. So now, the man's name was Ken Strong. He was a cussing, non-Mormon, but knew more about suits than anybody I've ever met or talked to in my life. And he lived here in Salt Lake City, and all he did was go around to key people, measure them up, and order the suits. They were all British wool, and they were all put together in Hong Kong. So that's the theory right there. So as he tells me, that is, Ken Strong says, I got in there, and he was so nice to me. I measured him up, not easy. And I told him that you told me to tell him he's to have a suit with a vest with a lapel on the vest. So he'd have 2 lapels, the suit and the vest. 2 lapels. He said, okay, that's what I'm going to do, whatever. So he got him all measured up. They picked out a material. Wilkinson said to him, I want to order 5 suits. And the guy said, no. I'll only have 1 done for you. What do you mean you only have 1 done for me? I want 5 suits. Well, you're not going to get the 5 suits from me. You're going to get 1. And we'll see how it looks on you and see how you feel. And then if you like them, I'll get you 2 or 3 more. We'll build up to the 5 that way. Wilkinson was satisfied. Well, it's these kind of little experiences that came down the road between Wilkinson and myself. Now, I have right here a piece of paper to tell you who he really is. This piece of paper is Remembering Ernie. This is what he says about his testimony. I want to bear my testimony that if you develop the habit of work, it will be the most invigorating, satisfying, relaxing, and the greatest blessing of your life. The opportunity to work is God's greatest gift to man. And this means 6 days a week. You will never be successful here or in any profession or business on a 40-hour a week. Now, this is from Ernest L. Wilkinson's assembly speech in 1966. There's some more things I would like to read. I just couldn't remember the exact words, and I don't want to try. I want to be as he spoke them. While many people think that I have boundless energy, the fact is that I often get very tired. I have learned that the mind is superior to matter, and that if I will just put my mind to it, I can generally overcome my physical fatigue. If I sometimes offend people, it is not because I want to, but because I am determined to get something done. Paul Harvey, whom I've introduced to you before on disc number 4, and I think in disc 5 also, made this statement about Ernest Wilkinson. We have a president I like to characterize as an academic George E. Patton, unafraid to tell it like it is. Now, the Blackfoot Indians gave Wilkinson an honorary designation because they were always late for these meetings. And he had tons of meetings with these Indian tribes that were late. And Wilkinson couldn't hardly tolerate that, but he had to, had no choice. But he made his feelings known to them. And so the Blackfoot Indians, and I assume that's that tribe up there in Idaho, near Blackfoot, Idaho, or in that vicinity, but I don't know for sure. They gave him the designation of Chief Frantic Bear. Chief Frantic Bear. I'd like to have a name like that if I know the truth, but I'm not worthy of anything like that. Now, this is just a little bit of facts on his 20 years. The academic buildings on the campus, when he started in 1951, there were only 6 buildings on the upper campus. When he left 20 years later, there were 254 permanent buildings and 85 temporary buildings from 6. Now, there was, in addition to the 6, there was that one building, nice size building, on the lower campus. Now, I took my watercoloring classes in that lower campus building my freshman and sophomore year. Now, student housing grew from accommodations of 1,300, that's rooms for these people to, students be able to rent, like little apartments, to 6,000. 1,300 to 6,000. Now, the enrollment increased 6 times in size. When he came, there were 4,004 students at BYU. But when he left, 20 years later, there was 25,116 students. That's unbelievable. Now, the faculty members grew from 244 to 932. And those faculty members with doctoral degrees increased from 50 to more than 500. Now, the budget funds for the university had been increased 7-fold. Now, I don't know about what that figure was. I don't think any of us will ever know those figures. But I know that I've talked to one source that's extremely, extremely knowledgeable several years ago. At one point, 1/3 of all tithing funds went to BYU. Now, he had the ability to not only obtain that money from the tithing funds with the approval of all the brethren, but they had the faith in him that he knew how to spend that money to maximize it, so that nothing would be wasted. This man was remarkable. This was one of a kind. So he maintained that if we educate these kids that come, they go to all parts of the world or all parts of the country, they grow up, they become future stake presidents, bishops, and whatever. And so that they have to have that talent because we have an unpaid clergy. We don't hire people to do those things. We have to do them ourselves. The original 5 colleges with 37 departments had been expanded to 13 colleges and 71 departments. In 1951, the campus had one branch. In 1971, they had 98 wards and 10 stakes. So I think with that, I'll just set this aside, and that kind of gives you all an understanding of why I wanted to somehow ingratiate myself in with Mr. And President Earnest Wilkinson, but he called me first. I didn't call him. I took advantage, or I should say I maximized that opportunity and hung with it. Now I can say this much about him. Later on in my life, and it was right towards the end of his life, I had taken the time to write my memoirs. I never published them, but I gave those memoirs to three people. The first one was to Ernest L. Wilkinson. The second one was to Ezra Taft Benson, and the third one was to Neil Maxwell, Elder Maxwell. Wilkinson called me the day after I gave my memoirs to him. He said, I want to meet you tomorrow at the Elder Club for lunch. So I was there. He says, I read that entire work of yours in one sitting. Read right clear through the night till I had read every single word. And I read it because it was so gripping. I couldn't set it down. Now, my story is being written by 2 professors at BYU. I know that when it's completed, no one's going to ever read it. Not even my own children's going to read it. But that thing of yours, I couldn't set it down. What have I got to do in money or whatever you want to have you write my life story? Because I know that I don't have a lot of time. Now, this was a hard thing for me to do, to say, President Wilkinson, I can't write that story. Because nobody can. Only you can. You picture in your mind that you're talking to 12, 13, 14-year-old children, and you reduce it down to that level. And all you do is tell stories. One story after another story. Just keep telling stories. Everybody likes a story. They want to know how it's going to end. That's all you got to do. But I don't know whether I could do that. I don't see myself being able to do that. I said, well, just think about it. Just picture how you would want to hear it if they were you and you were them. What you would want to hear from your own life story. How you would want it said to you, and you picture yourself as 13 or 14 years of age, at the most 14. And then start writing on that level. I know you're an attorney and you use these big, long words, but you've got to get it simple. Simple, simple. Well, he kept calling me. And a week before he died, he called again. I've often thought about that. But my self-image was not of such that I could do that. And to be honest with you, when I went to BYU, everyone had to take an English class. English, what, 101 or whatever it was called. Well, they had a class for those kids that weren't smart enough to take 101. And that's where I ended up. It's in that class. And I think I came out with a C at best. And now here, the president of that university, who was the president when I arrived in Provo, asked me in his most later years, would you please write my story for me? I don't know how to answer that really.